The cold Boston night clung to Nathan Hayes like a second skin as he loosened his tie, leaning back in the driver's seat of his sleek black sedan. The city lights blurred through the windshield, neon reflections streaking across his tired eyes. He had just closed another exhausting case at the firm, another victory that should have felt like triumph. But tonight, the weight of success felt strangely hollow. As he rolled down his window to let the icy air wash over him, a movement on the sidewalk caught his attention. A woman sat on the corner, her body wrapped in layers of worn blankets, a cardboard sign trembling in her hands. "Hungry, please help." Nathan reached instinctively for his wallet, pulling out a $20 bill. But when he leaned closer, his heart nearly stopped. The face beneath the tangled hair and shadow of despair was one he knew, one he had once loved with every fiber of his being. It was Claire Mitchell. His Claire, his former fiancée, who had vanished from his life a decade ago without a trace. For a moment, the city around him fell silent. The honking horns, the chatter of passers-by, even the chill wind, all disappeared. All Nathan could hear was the pounding of his own heart and the whisper of memories he thought he had buried forever. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He hadn't seen Claire in 10 years. 10 years of unanswered questions, nights spent staring at her old photographs, wondering why she had disappeared. She was supposed to have been at Juilliard by now, playing piano on grand stages, her music soaring into the rafters. That was the dream she carried, the dream he once promised to support with all he had. But the woman before him was a ghost of that dream. Her clothes were ragged, her hands trembling with cold. Her eyes, once bright and full of fire, were now dim, heavy with exhaustion. "Claire?" Nathan whispered, his voice barely audible above the hum of traffic. Her head snapped up, startled by the sound of her name. For a second, recognition flickered in her eyes, but just as quickly it faded, replaced by a wall of shame. She pulled her blanket tighter around herself, as if trying to disappear. Nathan's hand shook as he held out the $20 bill. "Here, take this," he said softly, his throat tight. She hesitated, her lips parting as though to speak, but then she shook her head. "I can't," she muttered, her voice raspy, broken. Nathan felt a sharp ache in his chest. The Claire he knew had been proud, yes, but not like this. This was different. This was survival mixed with humiliation. "Please," he said gently, sliding the bill into her hand before she could resist. Their fingers brushed, and for a fleeting instant, he felt the echo of the warmth they had once shared. Claire stared down at the money, as though it were burning her skin. Then she looked up at him, her eyes wet, 1,000 unspoken words hanging between them. Nathan swallowed hard, his voice trembling. What happened to you?" But Claire said nothing. Instead, she turned her face away, her silence cutting deeper than any answer could. Nathan pulled his car to the side of the road, his mind spinning. He couldn't just drive away. Not now, not after finding her like this. Memories rushed back in waves. Her laughter in the college library, the night they got engaged under the stars, the music she used to play for him when life felt too heavy. He stepped out of the car, ignoring the bitter wind. "Claire," he said softly, approaching her. She stiffened, clutching her blanket tighter. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, Nathan, just go." Hearing his name on her lips after so many years nearly broke him. He crouched beside her, his eyes searching hers. "I thought you were gone. I thought something happened. Why didn't you come back?" Her eyes welled up, but she shook her head. "You don't understand. You can't." Nathan's heart ached at her words, but he refused to back down. "Then help me understand. Please, Claire. I can't just walk away." For a long, tense moment, she sat frozen, her breath trembling in the cold. Then, with a heavy sigh, she muttered, "After my parents died in that crash, everything fell apart. I lost the house, the money, the piano. I had nothing left. I couldn't face you. I didn't want you to see me like that." Her words hit him like a punch to the chest. 10 years of silence explained in a few shattering sentences. "Claire," his voice cracked. "You could have come to me. You still can." She shook her head violently, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No. You have a life now. You're successful, you have everything. Look at me, I'm nothing." Nathan reached for her hand, gripping it firmly despite her attempts to pull away. "You're not nothing. You never were. And I swear, I'm not leaving you out here like this." For the first time, Claire didn't resist. She just sat there, tears rolling silently, as Nathan held her hand against the backdrop of the cold Boston night. The next morning, Nathan sat at his kitchen table, staring into his untouched cup of coffee. The steam curled upward, disappearing into the quiet air, much like the calm he desperately sought but couldn't find. His mind was still on Claire. The fragile woman he had seen on that sidewalk wasn't the same vibrant pianist he once knew. And yet, in the faint tremor of her voice, in the shimmer of her tears, he recognized the Claire who had once made his world brighter. He could have just driven away last night, told himself it was fate, and left her to her struggles. But he hadn't. He had promised himself, as he held her hand in the cold, that he wouldn't turn his back again. By noon, Nathan found himself back on that same Boston street. The sun was out now, revealing the city's harsher truths. People passed by Claire without a glance, as though she were invisible. He watched her sit quietly on the corner, her cardboard sign resting in her lap, her face downcast. Taking a steadying breath, Nathan approached. "Claire," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of recognition and dread. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to come," Nathan replied. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about you." She sighed, shaking her head. "You don't understand what you're asking for. My life isn't yours anymore." Nathan crouched down, ignoring the curious stares of people walking past. "Then let me be part of it again. Just for today. Let me buy you a meal. Nothing more, nothing less." For a long while, Claire didn't respond. She stared at him, as though searching for a catch, a hidden motive. Finally, with a defeated sigh, she nodded. Together, they walked down the street to a small diner tucked between two shops. Nathan held the door open, and Claire stepped inside hesitantly, her eyes darting nervously, as if she didn't belong. The warmth of the diner wrapped around them, carrying the scent of coffee and pancakes. Nathan chose a booth by the window, giving her space but close enough to feel present. When the waitress arrived, Claire hesitated before whispering, "Just coffee." Nathan frowned. "Claire, order something real." She looked away. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You never were." His voice was firm but kind. After a pause, she ordered a simple plate of eggs and toast. As the food arrived, Nathan watched her take her first cautious bite. The way her eyes closed, as if savoring a luxury long forgotten, nearly broke him. As Claire ate, Nathan kept his voice soft, careful not to push too hard. "Do you still play?" he asked gently. Her fork paused midair. For a moment, her eyes flickered with something, pain, maybe longing. Then she shook her head. "No, not in years." Nathan swallowed the lump in his throat. Claire had once been unstoppable at the piano, her fingers dancing like fire and rain across the keys. To imagine her silenced was almost unbearable. "Do you remember," Nathan began carefully, "that night you played in the park?" The whole crowd stopped just to listen. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, fragile and fleeting. "I remember," she admitted quietly. "It feels like someone else's life now." Nathan leaned forward. "It's still yours. That part of you hasn't disappeared." Her smile vanished, replaced with a wall of bitterness. "Don't say that. You don't know what it's like, Nathan. To lose everything. To wake up one day and realize you're just forgotten. People look at me like I'm trash. They don't see me. And honestly, maybe that's easier." Nathan's heart twisted, but he didn't flinch. "I see you, Claire. I always did." Her eyes welled with tears, and she looked away, shaking her head. "You're making this harder." "Good," Nathan whispered, his voice steady with resolve. "Because I can't just watch you fade away. Not again." The diner grew quiet around them as Claire set down her fork, her shoulders trembling. For the first time since they reunited, her defenses cracked. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. Nathan reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. She didn't pull back this time. Instead, she sat frozen, her breath trembling, as if torn between pushing him away and collapsing into his arms. For Nathan, it was enough. It was a start. The next few days blurred into a rhythm Nathan hadn't expected. Every evening, after leaving the firm, he found himself returning to that same Boston corner. Sometimes Claire was there, sometimes she wasn't, but each time she appeared, he felt the same sharp ache in his chest, an ache of guilt, of longing, of hope. One evening, as he parked his car near the diner, he saw her sitting on the curb, arms folded tightly against the biting wind. He hurried over, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Claire," he said softly, kneeling beside her. She glanced up, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Nathan, you don't have to keep coming." "I know," he said gently. "But I want to." Her shoulders sagged, exhaustion etched deep into her features. He offered his coat, draping it over her before she could protest. The way she clutched it to her chest, as if starved for warmth, made his throat tighten. They walked together again to the diner, slipping into the same booth by the window. Nathan noticed how her eyes darted around less this time, how she seemed a fraction more comfortable. After ordering soup and bread, Nathan leaned forward. "Claire, I want to help you. Not just with meals. With more than that." Her spoon froze midway to her lips. "Help me how?" "By giving you a place to rest. A roof. A bed. Just for a while. Until you can get back on your feet." She shook her head instantly. "No. Absolutely not. I don't want your pity. I don't want charity." Nathan held her gaze firmly. "This isn't pity. It's me trying to make things right." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "And what if I can't be fixed? What if this is who I am now?" Nathan leaned across the table, his voice steady but tender. "Then I'll sit with you here every night, as long as it takes, until you believe otherwise." For the first time, Claire's defenses wavered. She stared at him, eyes glassy, torn between disbelief and a fragile spark of hope. 2 days later, Nathan made a decision he hadn't planned on. As he sat in his living room, his daughter, Grace, sprawled across the couch with her sketchbook, he realized something. Claire needed not just food or shelter, she needed to feel seen, accepted, without judgment. And no one he knew carried that gift as purely as Grace. "Sweetheart," Nathan said gently, "would you like to meet an old friend of mine?" Grace looked up with wide brown eyes. "A friend?" She tilted her head curiously. "Like a girlfriend?" Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "No. Someone very special from a long time ago. She's going through a hard time right now." Grace's face softened. "Then we should be kind to her." The next evening, Nathan brought Claire to a small cafe, telling her he had someone to introduce. Claire arrived hesitantly, her steps uncertain. But when Grace bounded up with a bright smile, clutching her sketchbook, Claire froze. "Hi," Grace said simply, sliding into the booth beside her father. "I'm Grace." Claire blinked, visibly caught off guard. You have a daughter?" Nathan smiled faintly. "Yeah. Grace is 9. She's my whole world." Grace studied Claire with innocent curiosity. "Daddy says you play the piano." "That's so cool." "I draw, but music is like magic." Something flickered in Claire's expression, a mix of surprise, sadness, and a fragile warmth she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply whispered, "Thank you." As the evening went on, Grace chatted freely, asking questions about favorite songs, about life in Boston, about dreams. Claire listened quietly, her guard slowly lowering under the weight of a child's unfiltered kindness. For the first time, Nathan watched Claire smile, small, hesitant, but real. And in that smile, he saw the beginning of something he had feared was lost forever, the Claire he once knew. Days turned into weeks, and Nathan continued meeting Claire almost daily. Sometimes they walked along the Charles River, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered diamonds. Other times, they sat in the cafe with Grace, sharing quiet conversations that carried more weight than words could express. Slowly, Claire began to change. Her cheeks grew less hollow, her posture less defensive. She even let Nathan buy her a second-hand coat, one that fit her properly. But more than the coat, it was the dignity he offered her, never pushing, never prying, that began to mend something deep inside. One crisp Saturday morning, Nathan surprised her. "There's something I want to show you," he said, leading her into a small music shop tucked away on a side street. The moment Claire stepped inside, her breath caught. Rows of instruments lined the walls, the faint scent of polished wood filling the air. And there, in the corner, stood a grand piano. Her knees weakened. Her hands trembled. She hadn't touched piano keys in years. Not since the accident. Not since her world collapsed. Nathan guided her closer. "Play something," he urged softly. Claire shook her head violently. "No, I can't. I'm not that person anymore." Nathan's voice carried quiet firmness. "You are. You always were. That hasn't changed." For a long moment, she stood frozen, the past clawing at her chest. Then, almost against her will, her fingers hovered above the keys. A tentative note escaped, shaky and uneven. Another followed. And then, like a floodgate breaking, music poured out, soft, haunting, filled with years of buried sorrow. Nathan stood silently, his throat tightening. Grace, who had come along, sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes wide with wonder. When the final note faded, Claire's hands fell limply into her lap. Tears streamed down her face. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Nathan knelt beside her. "Claire, you deserve so much more than this. You deserve a life, a future, and I'll be here, if you'll let me." Her heart wanted to believe him. But deep down, a voice still screamed, "You're broken. You'll ruin everything." For a brief while, the piano became their bridge. Nathan noticed how Claire's shoulders softened when she played, how her eyes lit with something resembling the woman he had once known. Grace would beg her to play lullabies, clapping with joy after every song. But with hope came fear, and with fear came retreat. One night, as Nathan walked Claire back toward the shelter she sometimes stayed in, she stopped abruptly. "This has to end," she blurted. Nathan froze. "What are you talking about?" "You. Me. Grace. All of it. I don't belong in your world. I'm a mess, Nathan. I sleep in shelters, I beg on streets, Her voice cracked. "I lost everything. Don't you see? I'll only drag you down." His jaw clenched, fighting back the ache in his chest. "Claire, you're not a burden. You're not broken." But her eyes blazed with fear. "Don't you get it? Everyone I've loved, my parents, you, I've lost. And if Grace gets attached, if she sees me for what I really am, I'll only hurt her too." The rawness of her words cut through him like glass. Nathan reached for her hand, but she pulled away as though burned. Tears streaked her face as she whispered, "Don't come looking for me anymore." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the Boston night, leaving Nathan standing alone under the dim streetlights, the cold wind howling like a cruel echo of her absence. That night, for the first time since their reunion, Nathan felt the crushing weight of losing her all over again. And yet, deep in his heart, he knew this story wasn't finished. Because this time, he wasn't going to give up. For days, Nathan didn't see Claire. The empty sidewalks where she once stood with her cardboard sign now felt colder than ever. He drove by the familiar corners, checked the shelters she sometimes stayed at, even wandered through the parks where she liked to sit. But Claire was gone. Each night, Nathan tucked Grace into bed, answering her hopeful question with the same gentle lie. "Maybe tomorrow, sweetheart. Maybe tomorrow we'll see her again." Inside, however, his heart was breaking. He had found her after 10 long years, only to lose her again to shadows she couldn't escape. And then it happened. One chilly evening, as Nathan walked past a small church downtown, he heard it. Faint at first, almost lost beneath the city's hum. But unmistakable. Music. He followed the sound, his steps quickening. And there she was. Through the cracked open door, he saw Claire sitting at the old upright piano inside the church, her fingers moving with a fragile grace. The music wasn't flawless, it wavered, hesitated, but it was alive. Nathan stood frozen, overwhelmed. When the song ended, Claire looked up, and their eyes locked. Her face was pale, streaked with exhaustion, but in her eyes glimmered a flicker of something he hadn't seen in years. "I thought I lost you again," Nathan whispered as he stepped closer. Tears welled in her eyes. "You should have." "No," he said firmly. "Not this time." He placed his coat gently around her shoulders, his voice breaking. "Claire, you don't have to do this alone anymore." For the first time, she didn't argue. She let herself lean into his warmth, the music of her past still echoing in the silent church. The weeks that followed were not easy. Healing never is. But step by step, Claire began to reclaim her life. Nathan helped her find a safe apartment, small but warm. He connected her with a community program that supported women overcoming homelessness. And most importantly, he gave her patience, never demanding, never rushing, just steady, unwavering presence. Grace became her anchor. The little girl's laughter filled Claire's silence, her innocent trust melting walls that years of pain had built. Each time Grace held her hand or begged her to play the piano, Claire felt pieces of her shattered heart stitching back together. One snowy evening, Nathan invited Claire and Grace to a small recital at a local community center. At first, Claire refused. "I can't," she whispered. "I'll fall apart." But Nathan smiled gently. Falling apart isn't failure. It's how we rebuild. And so, trembling but determined, Claire sat at the piano once more, this time in front of a small, supportive crowd. The first notes quivered, but then her music filled the hall, rich with pain, healing, and hope. When the final chord faded, the room erupted in applause. Claire looked out and saw Nathan, tears streaming down his face, and Grace clapping with pure, childlike joy. In that moment, she realized something powerful. She wasn't lost anymore. She wasn't just the broken girl from the past. She was alive, loved, and worthy of beginning again. After the recital, Nathan wrapped her in his arms. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Claire, you came back to me." Her tears flowed freely as she answered, "No, Nathan. We came back to each other." And as Grace hugged them both tightly, snow fell softly outside, silent, pure, and new. just like the life they were ready to build together.